مرحبا. ضيف اليوم غير عن كل الضيوف، رجل أعمال لبناني أرمني أمريكي صدر اسمه وسائل الإعلام العالمية بالأيام الأخيرة لما أعلن أنه الشركة اللي هو من مؤسسيها ورئيس مجلس إدارتها شركة مودرنا طورت لقاح خاص لمحاربة الكورونا لأول مرة بالعالم العربي، وبلقاء حصري لCNN بالعربية اليوم بيستقبل نوبار أفيان. You are the man of the hour, probably of the week, and maybe of the year. And Moderna made headlines over the last few days when you announced that the vaccine you've been working on has 94.5% efficacy rate. Are you confident that this will lead us to the end of the pandemic?
Well, the end of the pandemic can at least start with the availability of a vaccine, but there's quite a ways to go because we need to make sure that the vaccine is distributed, first approved from a regulatory standpoint, then distributed to everyone who will take one. We have to make sure that the public has confidence in taking the vaccine. And then over time, collectively, the virus will really have no place to go. And then we can look back and say the pandemic was dealt with. But I think confidence is a strong word. I'm confident that there will be vaccines. That should translate into the end, but we have some work to do.
How long do you think it will take us before we eradicate COVID-19?
Again, I think there's a lot of speculation about that. And as also, of course, it gets into politics because this has affected the whole population on the planet. And people want this to go away and they want to return to normal. But of course, that will be a function of science and of actually behavior. And to the extent that people actually adopt the right measures, both vaccines and other safety measures, I think it can be something that will certainly diminish sometime late in 2021, maybe in 2022. Anything sooner than that is an upside scenario, and I'd rather not plan for the upside as a society because the consequence of getting it wrong is more deaths, more suffering. So I'm on the cautious side. I just want to do the right things, and then it will take care of itself.
So this will take me a bit to what a Pfizer representative said yesterday, that he's expecting summer 2021 to be a normal summer. Do you disagree with them?
You know, I don't know in what context they said that, and more so, I don't know how they could know that. It sounds more to me like a hope and an ambition, and I think it's good to have very high hopes. When we started, we were the first company to start developing this vaccine, and when we started in March, we hoped we would have a vaccine ready for approval by the end of the year. But boy, was that not the only possible outcome. So hopes are good because it motivates people, but hopes could also be bad in that people start making plans and they get disappointed. So I think summer of 2021 for eradicating, or let's say at least normal summer of 2021 is a highly, highly optimistic view. Again, not because of the vaccine, but because of the rate of adoption and rate of availability. That will take some time.
Can you, in layperson's terms and in very simple words, guide us through the process of the vaccine?
Look, conceptually, vaccines historically have been made of either the virus that has been what's called attenuated, which means it's not quite the whole virus, but it's been damaged, if you will, so it's not very threatening. You give that to people and their immune system attacks it. Or it is a piece of the virus that people have made in laboratories and given to people. Those are the two approaches to vaccines. That's what takes many, many years to develop. In the case of Moderna, we pioneered, starting some 10 years ago, a technology called messenger RNA or mRNA, which uses molecules that are in our cells. These are information molecules that copy DNA and make a protein. And by using that new technology, we're able to deliver very quickly into our vaccines the information needed for the body of somebody who gets the vaccine to make a protein from the virus. This, you know, the pictures that you see on the virus that looks like almost like a, you know, Christmas decoration kind of with all the spikes. So that the spikes on the surface, we have the ability now to cause your own body to make those without any virus, without any danger. That protein tells the immune system, come and get me. And when the immune system learns how to do that, when the real virus shows up, it's ready to attack and to neutralize. That's how the vaccine that Moderna makes works. Now, in terms of the development, we had to first test it to see safety in people, which we did from March to May. We announced our results in May. And then we had to expand it to 30,000 people in the US. Half of them got the vaccine, half of them got placebo, which basically means no vaccine. And then we compared in each group how many of them got the disease. And up until now, when we reported our data, some 95 people had gotten sick on our trial. Of those, 90 were people who did not get the vaccine, 5 were people who had the vaccine, and none of those 5 had severe COVID. There were 11 of the 90 that had severe COVID on the other side. That's what gave us the ability to announce the results, because that's statistically very, very significant.
And how long will people who are receiving the vaccine be immune for? And is this something that we need to redo every year, like the flu shot, for example, or it's a one-off?
Sharbel, it's among the things that is new with this virus, which we had never heard of 1 year ago, is that we don't know. There's many things we don't know. We don't know how the virus is affecting the lung, the heart, the many other organs, the brain. We also don't know how the immune system will do in protecting us over the long term. It has not been enough of a long term to know whether it will protect us. But we will soon find out, because we have already people on the trial since July. Of course, by January, we'll be able to tell you whether it protects for 6 months. In next year, in summer, we'll do it if it protects for 1 year. So because we have 30,000, of which 15,000 have the vaccine, we will follow them and we will see if the protection is deteriorating. If you ask for my guess, I would say that there's a very good chance of getting at least 6 to 12 months of protection. And there's also a chance that it might be many years of protection. We just don't know yet.
Pfizer and Moderna have been the front runners in the race against COVID-19. However, what we know right now is that the storage and the freezing and the refrigeration conditions of Moderna are easier and more favorable, I would say. How do you see this affecting maybe the sale on the longer term? And do you think that this is something that will be in favor of the company because it's easier for other countries to get it, to store it, and to distribute it?
Well, look, one of the things I'll say is that when you're dealing with a pandemic, the normal market forces that makes your iPhone better than somebody else's Samsung phone, whatever, don't apply, because we need all the vaccine we can get. So the first thing I will say is that with all the vaccines that will be available, will have some advantages and disadvantages. But I suspect in the first year during the pandemic, that will not be as big a factor. Certainly, it will help in the distribution. And Moderna, you should also know, your audience should know that Moderna has previously developed and tested in humans 10 different vaccines. All of the other folks who are using this kind of technology in mRNA have not tested any vaccines. And so we had the chance over the years to improve our technology so that we could avoid the deep freeze of minus 70 degrees. Our vaccine can be stored at minus 20 degrees, regular kind of freezing conditions. It can be kept for a month in a refrigerator at your home. You won't have it at your home, you won't need it, but you can do that in any regular refrigerator. And it can be kept outside on the table for 12 hours. That was the result of many years of improvements and improvements. Now, how will it help? It will help the people who are at the front line administering the vaccine. It will help governments decide how to get it everywhere quickly instead of having people come to a central location. So there are many things that's an advantage. But at the end of the day, I don't want to send the signal that one vaccine will win, another vaccine will not, because we need all the vaccine we can get. There's billions of people who are going to need this, truly. And any one of us is going to be able to make 500 million, 1 billion doses, perhaps in the next 12 months. We need much more.
Yeah, and what about the other vaccines we've been hearing about? The Chinese vaccine, the Russian vaccine?
There are vaccines that are being developed in China and Russia that are using a different technology completely, which is using a live virus, not the coronavirus, but another virus called an adenovirus, which then delivers the instructions for the body to be able to make the same spike protein as we use. It's something that is being tested. There's some preliminary results. The question will be, can everybody get the same type of protection? So what will matter is the efficacy and the protective value of the vaccine and also the safety. So we are awaiting results from AstraZeneca. They are our colleagues. We know them very, very well. We've partnered with them with Moderna and other projects. So we wish them success. We wish Johnson & Johnson success. And of course, we also wish the Chinese and the Russians, who have very similar technologies among each other, also success. And again, it's not being kind. It's literally the world needs it. It's a very, very unusual situation where, again, if people are starving, one person's food is not going to be that much better tasting than others. You just want to get it out there. And that's the way it feels. It will be interesting to see how long these vaccines last. As you asked earlier, I think if there is a difference, we chose doses and an approach that we thought will give us maximum protection. So I believe that all the choices we made should give us the best chance at not the most effective vaccine, although it's very, very effective, obviously, because I think others can get there, but the most durable. Now, I don't have data to prove that, but the dose we use is significantly higher and should produce a more robust immune response and therefore hopefully more durable protection, yet to be proven.
Noubar, was it a conscious decision to announce the results of the studies and the findings and all of that after the US elections?
Look, in our case, if anybody tracks when we did what we did, you would realize that we already long ago knew that we would not have data before the elections, and we have made that clear and announced. In fact, one of the things we did, Sharbel, in the US, there is a growing concern about clinical trials not being representative of the demographics of the population, in particular diversity. And so you may or may not realize that in the summer, we slowed down our trial to include more people of color, and we have now 37% of our trial that represents people of color, Hispanics, blacks, etc. That was a cautious decision. That had nothing to do with the election. That had to do with the fact that we needed to restore confidence in a vaccine that it had been tested in the right people, also elderly people, which are being affected by this. So in our case, not at all. Really, in general, the politics of this has been largely generally covered in the media, and there's been a lot of controversy. If you could imagine a regular day at Moderna, it's basically hundreds of people working on making the vaccine, testing the vaccine, preparing next generations. There's very little time for politics.
Do you think that the complex transition in the US presidency might complicate the distribution of the vaccine at a later stage?
It shouldn't. I hope it doesn't, but it might. And the reason it might is that we're living in strange times, and it seems everything is open for controversy and potential kind of a disruption. So, for example, if the relationships between the federal, the state, and the governors becomes frayed, and if some governors do one thing and another set of governors do another, I'm sure it will complicate things. And that, in turn, seems to be somewhat politically motivated. I hope, at the end of the day, that as it relates to the vaccine, nobody touches any aspect of that and gets in the way. But we are, of course, quite cautious, and we're making sure that there's a lot of communication, a lot of planning and coordination, and that's the best we can do.
But here, let's talk a bit more about distribution. How will this be done? According to what criteria, and what countries will get the vaccine first?
Well, okay, so that's a good question. Within the US and within other countries, the local governments will determine the sequence of distribution. At least in the US, it's pretty clear that upon emergency use authorization, people who are the most vulnerable and the healthcare workers will likely get it first. And then there will be wave after wave that will expand it. So that what's been announced is that by the second quarter, the hope is to have enough vaccine to get anybody who wants to get vaccinated to be vaccinated. That's at least the goal that Operation Warp Speed, the entity that was created to handle all of this, has publicly stated. And we certainly will do our part to make that possible. Same in other countries. Now, in terms of access, in terms of securing it, countries have been making deals with the suppliers. If you look at AstraZeneca, some of these big pharmaceutical companies, they have made very, very large supply deals, even before the vaccine is known to work. And some countries have bought many times what they need, just to be sure that they get it very quickly. Other countries have not yet secured supplies or are trying to secure supplies from different places. My advice generally is that if you really do the math, the saving money on this vaccine is a miscalculation, because we're spending more money on diagnostic tests per day than we will ever spend on the vaccine. And the vaccine kind of, to some extent, gets rid of the necessity to do everyday testing. So cost-wise, people have thrown out numbers anywhere between $10 to $30 a dose to $40 a dose. These numbers, even with 2 doses, are comparable to single diagnostic tests. So I think what's going to happen is people are going to secure supply at the government level, distribute it at the level of their health ministry's decisions, and then we will provide it and then help with pharmacovigilance, which means tracking what's happening when people take the vaccine, making sure it's all safe and being measured.
Noubar, by when do you think people in the Middle East, like me, random people, let's say not priority cases, will be able to get the vaccine? Approximate time. I know it's not, nothing is set in stone here and there are so many parameters. Just give me an approximate date.
I think again, I don't know what supply deals each country has made or is making. Again, you would know that better, but generally speaking, I think broad supplies will become to be available starting in Q2, going into Q3, third quarter of next year. So I would say if people have secured supply, I would expect second to third quarter of next year that supply should begin to flow. Again, not 100% on day one, but it will begin to flow.
Noubar, I'd like to switch gears a bit and move from the vaccine and your professional career a bit to your personal inspiring story, which is also pretty impressive. You are Lebanese Armenian. You moved out of Lebanon when you were 13. Is this correct?
Yes, it is. I left in 1975 with my family.
And why did you leave back then?
Well, look, we had an idyllic life in Beirut. All my memories in childhood are in Beirut. Beirut was a great place to be, physically, the society, and everything about it. But unfortunately, whenever you have idyllic places, conflicts arise. And every few years, there would be some type of a conflict. And in 1975, the civil war in Lebanon broke out. And in the beginning, we all thought it was another passing thing. But already by the middle of the year, it became clear that this could be a very long-term conflict. And my father and mother decided that we're 3 brothers, that we really shouldn't take the risk of being there for many years when schools are closed and life is difficult. And so we basically made the decision, tough decision, left everything behind, left his business behind to move to Montreal. And I was grateful that Canada actually took us in as basically political refugees. Basically, we left the country under kind of warlike conditions, but very much formative years in Beirut, and a big part of my culture is Lebanese.
What did you keep from that culture? I don't know, tell me a bit more. Have you been to Lebanon recently? What kind of memories do you have? Tell me a bit about that.
Yes. It's funny. We're a small family, because Armenians, many Armenian families have been basically massacred to the point where the only surviving people are 10, 20 people. There's, I think, maybe 20 people that are named Afian in the world. We were a much bigger family. And so, we were reborn basically in Beirut. My mother's family, my father was not born in Beirut. He was born in Bulgaria, and he immigrated when the communist regime came. So, if you go back, every Armenian, probably every Lebanese, has some story of why they got chased from one place to the other. We were the product of that. But, look, basically, Armenians in Lebanon are an amalgam of both cultures. And there's a very distinctly Lebanese version of Armenian, that where you see the joie de vivre in their life, you see the optimism, you see the tendency to celebrate, the kindness. All of those things are almost, I'd say, to a maximum in Lebanon. That's how I grew up. So those were very fond memories. And the fact that we immigrated and the fact that we had to leave all that behind probably instilled a sense of trying to keep a piece of it in what I do going forward. And so, there's a lot of things that continue to be part of my life, whether it's music. My friends, most of my friends in Boston are Lebanese Armenians or Syrian Armenians. Of course, I have also Lebanese friends. So, it's just more familiarity, I would say. And then the rest, as I mentioned, about just this culture of resilience coming out of sheer optimism.
With all the political turmoil happening in Lebanon and the economic collapse that I'm sure you know about, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? I'm less familiar with the Lebanese political situation, but I am familiar that it's been very, very hard to get agreement on anything. And unfortunately, I think that is the biggest obstacle. By the way, that problem is increasingly the case in the US. It's increasingly the case
in another country that I spent a lot of effort on, which is Armenia. And so we're in a period where it's harder and harder to agree. Maybe social media is causing that because people keep hearing over and over what they believe because they've been surrounded by the voices they believe. And so they think they're right suddenly, as opposed to when everybody was the minority because they had no idea who agreed with them. Lebanon needs, and many other countries, for transformation, need people who choose destinations over directions. And I think that will give me more confidence, not just optimism, that we could be on a better path. And everything I'm saying to you equally applies to other places.
Any message to the Lebanese politicians?
Put the future first, put people first, and put the desire to get elected behind that. Because then, if everybody does that, the outcome will be better. I know it's extremely hard to do, because if you don't get elected, you don't have a voice. But if you get elected by saying whatever it takes, then that's a problem as well. So I think everybody has to, we're at a time, especially coming out of a pandemic. My concern is this pandemic had a physical crisis in the first year. It will have a lasting economic crisis for quite a while. And it's going to take unparalleled leadership for us to pull out of it. I really, Sharbel, as optimistic as we all are culturally, many of us, the notion that we're going to go back to a normal is itself something you can question. I think we're going to be in a new abnormal for a while until a new normal emerges. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen with a vaccine. It's going to happen by societies adapting to the trauma we've just gone through and are still going through.
And as one of the pioneering entrepreneurs from Arab roots, what message of hope would you have for the Arab young men and women watching us today?
Look, a generation ago, basically people aspired to get jobs, get professions, and that was the best you could do. So, of course, the entrepreneurial spirit has always been there in the Middle East as it relates to trade. My father was in the trade business, and that the businessman in the Middle East often was viewed as that, especially in Lebanon. Of course, in other countries where there's natural resources, it's a bit different. But now you have a new generation, certainly the generation after mine, that has available to it a completely new profession, which is called entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship, as you know, the root of the word is entreprendre, is to undertake something. So take initiative, believe you can do it, be willing to fail, but then success should find you. And I think that is a completely new profession, not a hobby, not a way to make money quickly, but a profession. And I think that the youth in the Middle East definitely can dedicate themselves to learning, getting better at, practicing, and ultimately using it as their economic ticket to creating a better society. And then what you do with the rewards that you earn is a measure of your kind of morals and your ideals. And I think one of the other things is that all of the entrepreneurs who are benefiting from the availability of this new approach should go back and help the countries and the cultures that they're from so that other people have opportunity. And certainly in my case, I've been doing that for some period of time. Of course, Armenia is also a highly needy country. And after the Soviet Union, I spent quite a bit of time trying to help there. And I've seen how the youth that choose this path basically can change the country. And so I would encourage people not to be hesitant. Innovation is a form of immigration. It's an immigration in thought. And one of the things that countries can do is actually choose to immigrate without leaving the country. And the only way you can do that is if you change the country. So you either go to another country or you change your country so it becomes another country, and so you don't have to leave it. Immigration is a tool that you could use for progress either way. And I think that for the majority in a country, the availability of leaving the country is not there and certainly is not ideal for the country. But people, leaders, adopting an attitude of immigrating to a better place, to a better future, that I think is every bit as much an opportunity and excitement. And it has not been possible in the past without entrepreneurship, but it is today.
Speaking of immigration, we live in a time with a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric. We may even call it immigrant phobia. What message do you have to the communities that still fear immigrants?
Well, it is the case, especially in the U.S. I ended up coming into the U.S. for my education, but I always grew up with the ideal of the U.S. being a melting pot. And I like that idea a lot in the sense that while cultures and ethnicities make us different, we need to try to have a commonality. Otherwise, we're simply going to be constantly judged by our differences, not by our contributions. And I think that is a standard that is being a little bit lost in the U.S., and I hope that it recovers over time, and everywhere else as well. I think, look, immigrants make countries, and I think that countries that don't have any immigrants often over time somewhat deteriorate. So I think we need to be both on the receiving end of things. I mean, look, Sharbel, I'll tell you a personal fact and a memory. Lebanon's immigration laws were such that my father, who immigrated in Lebanon, could not get a Lebanese passport because he was not born there. I was born in Lebanon with no Lebanese passport because my father was not born there. Those are arcane laws that should be replaced so that anybody who wants to immigrate to Lebanon or any other country can do that, recognizing that that's what's going to cause the country to constantly be renewed. And because people who come someplace bring with them hope and determination and risk appetite. People who leave a place take it somewhere else. So there are some things we should do as well to just open up a bit to this. Of course, there's concerns because if refugees come and the country cannot support them, but we have to be clever about this.
Okay, speaking of Lebanon, I know that you still speak a bit of Arabic. Is this correct? Let me test you today. So, بعدكم تحكوا عربي بالبيت؟
مش بالبيت، بس فيني أحكي شوية.
ومع العائلة مع الأصحاب مع مين بتحكي أكثر شيء عربي؟
مع أصحاب بس هيك. Super hard to do for me in a formal setting.
No worries.
But next time when I'm in the music hall, I can have a drink or two, then I can speak with you.
Before we close this interview, can we know what are the next steps for the vaccine? So now it has to be approved by the FDA and some medical authorities as well?
Yes. In each country, mainly countries, the regulatory authorities have to review the file. And once they approve it, then the supplies begin to happen. And hopefully in the US, that can happen already by the end of the year. Inshallah.
Awesome. Inshallah. Great news. And inshallah, you'll be back to the Middle East soon for visits and maybe for more sustainable business, I would say, on the longer term, and to see friends and families who I'm telling you are very, very proud of you. By the way, you've been the talk of the town in the region for a while. Social media, all the news reports are all about the big success you made, about Nobár, about Mودرنا, and we're really proud of all those achievements. So thank you so much for your time, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.